If you are feeling chronically fatigued, hormones could be the culprit. Today, I'm going to talk about how hormones can help get your energy back.
You're watching the Dr. Jake podcast.
I'm Dr. Jake. I'm a naturopathic medical doctor and integrative physician in Salt Lake City. On this channel, I share with you how you can heal your body down to the root cause and get your energy back without any harmful drugs or surgery. Be sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. I recently filmed a podcast with my co-host, Teresa Marie, in which we talked about bioidentical hormones and how this can be related to your energy issues. Make sure you stick around to the end because we're going to talk about how quickly you can get your energy back and also how it can synergistically work with other symptoms.
Welcome back to the Integrative Medica podcast with Dr. Jake. I am Teresa. I'm a mom. I'm a health nut. I'm a wife to a cancer thriver. And I'm here with Dr. Jake to talk about how he uses bioidentical hormones to treat chronic fatigue. And I'm especially interested in learning about this because I know that I've definitely struggled from time to time with just bouts of fatigue that just I can't seem to get rid of at times. Eager to see how bioidentical hormones can help in this. And it seems like it's not a problem that's, rare these days, Dr. Jake. It seems like a lot of people are really struggling with fatigue.
So I love talking about fatigue. It's an exciting topic for me because so many people are dealing with it and it's really keeping them from really enjoying and loving their lives. So it's going to be fun to talk about how bioidentical hormones is involved in this chronic fatigue picture.
Definitely. Okay, well, let's just jump right to it. And before we even really, look at bioidentical hormones, really thinking about chronic fatigue, right? What is it and what are hormones obviously can play a role in it, but what are some of the big causes of chronic fatigue?
So big causes of chronic fatigue is we need to look at all the various hormones. So we need to look at the thyroid. We need to look at the thyroid in detail. Probably a lot of you hearing this and if you're dealing with fatigue, you went to your regular doctor, they ordered a TSH, you said, oh, your thyroid's fine. But what you need to do is go really in detail into it. Check your TSH, your free T3, your free T4, your reverse T3 autoimmune antibodies. So you really know if you really do have a thyroid issue. We also want to make sure that your cortisol in the right balance. You're not making too much, not making too little. This is a big cause of chronic fatigue too. Obviously, your sex hormones, your estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, and testosterone have a big piece with our fatigue. There's chronic bugs like chronic viruses, bacteria, parasites, all these things, funguses, all these things can be involved in causing chronic fatigue. Food sensitivities, leaky gut syndrome, having certain bugs that aren't supposed to be in the gut can lead to this. Nutrient deficiencies, chronic exposures, on and on. There's so many different causes, and that's why you really want to go to integrative physician because they're the only ones that are really going to know how to really identify what is the specific cause. They're not just going to give you a methamphetamine or Adderall because you're not able to function very well. You don't have low energy and you can't focus.
That makes a lot of sense to me. It seems like those types of drugs, it's that might give you some energy, but it's false energy. It's not dealing with the potential root cause of why you're feeling fatigue in the first place. And I know, we actually in an earlier episode, we had actually gone over my situation with fatigue. And I know that you had run a number of different tests with me, a lot of what you're really talking about now, just to kind of rule out some of those issues. It seems like, though, that hormones seem to play, hormones are not just always sex hormones, right? There's the thyroid hormones, there's the adrenal hormones, there's, and then there's the sex hormones and so forth. So it seems like hormones are just a really vital part to our health, and they play a role in just so many different ways. So when we're specifically looking at somebody who has a fatigue issue and you've done these tests and you've identified that they're having a hormone issue where bioidentical hormones could help, talk about that. What hormones might they be struggling with? And how do bioidentical hormones, how might they be a solution to their problem?
So let's talk about why we really need bioidentical hormones. There's a lot of sex hormones out there, and you might go to your OBGYN and they might prescribe something like hormone replacement therapy or something. So why do I go towards bioidentical hormones? Big thing is bioidentical hormones. It looks exactly chemically the same as our natural hormones were made. It's also made from plant compounds like wild yam, for example. Hormone replacement therapy is made from pregnant animals or used synthetically, and it's much more potent to the cells and doesn't look like our natural hormones. So it has more side effect profile typically because it acts too strongly on the receptor side. So I always like to go with bioidentical hormones. Also, I always like to prescribe my hormones based on each individual patient's needs. So I order specialized testing to really monitor how the hormones are working in the body and if you have the appropriate dosage in there. And every woman's going to be a little different. We know on the research where we want the numbers are, and I try to get it to that range. But let's say if someone's not really feeling great, I modify it based on that. Bioidenticals are what I use sex hormone wise. So why do I care about this with related to chronic fatigue? Our sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, DHA, testosterone, all these things are needed for our metabolism to work appropriately. They are little communicators throughout our body. They bind to our receptors and get our cells working. If they aren't working appropriately, we're not going to be making energy production inside our cells. Our mitochondria is not going to go through the processes it's supposed to make ATP, is what our body uses for energy. So if you have an imbalance of your estrogen or progesterone, let's say you have way too much estrogen compared to progesterone. I see this all the time. This is very common for women that are still menstruating. Sometimes they experience menstruating issues. I do see this commonly, like they have really bad PMS or a lot of cramping or a lot of bleeding, or they have irregular cycles. It can be that. But some women aren't necessarily experiencing that. Their cycles are actually pretty good, but they are having a lot of anxiety, depression, or chronic fatigue. And I'm like, hey, we need to look at your estrogen progesterone ratio. Many times I see, okay, wow, your progesterone is really low. Your estrogen is too high. Estrogen is very excitatory. It's really going to mess with a lot of mechanisms of action in our body. This will affect how you sleep. And then you don't sleep very well. That's going to make you tired all the time too. Also, progesterone is needed to calm our brain down. So if people are having a lot of times when I see people with chronic fatigue, it's not like they just have fatigue. They many times have a lot of other things going on, like anxiety or depression. And a piece of their depression leading to the fatigue could be hormonal imbalances, like they don't have enough progesterone, they don't have enough estrogen, or they don't have enough testosterone.
Is this like a modern problem? These hormone issues, that people face, or is this just a natural part of just the aging process? And we see, our bodies break down and get older and we die. And part of it's just because you get older and your hormones start to go down, and this is just what happens.
I think we are seeing a lot more hormonal issues now than ever before, but we as physicians know more about hormones and how they work ever than before. Physicians didn't really know to look at this very well. So hard to say, but what I can say is we have tons of hormones in circulation. We are getting it in our water supply big time and in our food supply. I was just reading an article recently that we have tons of pharmaceuticals in our fish.
Wow.
Tons. So like out in the ocean. So it's a big problem. We're being bombarded by hormones all the time. So this is messing with how we make our testosterone. And a lot of this is we have really high estrogen. It's not like we are getting good progesterone. It's way too much estrogens. Also, we get estrogen from plastics, xenoestrogens, which are estrogens that act like they're chemicals that act like estrogen on our receptors and still cause the problems that happens and make it look like you have way too much estrogen. It can lead to imbalances of your estrogen progesterone ratio, which is a huge thing. It needs to be an appropriate balance. So yes, I think it is a modern issue based on our lifestyles and how toxic our world is right now, of how it's bombarding us. So we need to really pay attention a lot about obviously making sure we filter our water, eat good food, and be very cognizant there, because that's definitely a piece of hormonal issues too.
And I know we've had a different episode where you really started talking about, the skincare and beauty items that a lot of women are using that are actually interfering with their body's ability to make and balance out their hormones. So we've got a lot of different things that are happening in the world that we live in today that are giving us too much hormones, that are interfering with our body's ability to make hormones. That could be playing a role in our fatigue, and that's where bioidentical hormones can come in and help. So if somebody's listening to this today and they're struggling with fatigue, obviously hormones could be an issue. Maybe it's not. It just depends on them. They'd obviously have to, talk with you or talk to an integrative physician to learn more about, what's their particular issue and how they can resolve it. How can they get a hold of you if they want to learn more about their particular bioidentical or fatigue issue?
Yeah, visit our website, integrativemedica.com, find our phone number there, give it a call. You can set up a virtual visit or in-person visit with me or some of the other awesome doctors that I have on my team.
That's great. Now, my last question before we close today, if someone were to start taking bioidentical hormones for their fatigue, how soon might they start actually feeling better?
So let's say if it's only related to hormones, you will start feeling better in a week or two.
Wow.
Many times what I see with my patients, it's not just hormones. We're talking about hormones and how this relates to fatigue in detail today, but it usually isn't. But yeah, sometimes it is. It's just like you have an estrogen progesterone imbalance and that fixes it. Or you just have low testosterone and it fixes it. Or you just have really low DHEA and we just need to get that level up so you make your hormones appropriately and make cortisol appropriately. Or we just fix your hormones and that makes your thyroid work better. We didn't talk about that is your thyroid will be affected when your sex hormones are out of balance. If you have an estrogen progesterone issue, this will affect how your thyroid is made by your thyroid. Also how you convert your T4 to T3, which is T3 is actually active on the cell. So you could have everything looking great and you have perfect TSH, perfect free T4, but you don't convert it well to T3. Guess what? You're going to experience all the hypothyroid symptoms. So these imbalances of your bioidentical of your sex hormones can affect a myriad of other pathways of hormones, like your thyroid, cortisol, and many other things.
And so when you're talking about bioidentical hormones, then are you talking about bioidentical sex hormones, or does bioidentical hormones also, are there also bioidentical hormones for thyroid?
Yes, yeah. So there is. They are made like we have. You could call them bioidenticals because they're glandulars. You could get them. They come from a pig thyroid. Yeah, that's the main way they would do it in that regard. Also, you could get it in a bioidentical form in cortisol too. Like when you go to compounding pharmacy, you can get it compounded specifically in the bioidentical form too.
And I know that you've shared in a previous episode as well about how our cortisol can play a role in some of these issues too, where you're so stressed, your cortisol is so pumped, and then you're depleted of it, then you can develop adrenal fatigue. And then if your body can't find how to make cortisol because your adrenals are tapped, then it goes to your progesterone and starts using up your progesterone to make cortisol. So now you can see how there's just like this perfect storm that can happen, and how hormones can play a role and it can solve a lot of problems, but it also can be a piece of a larger puzzle, right? And that's why it's really important, I think, for someone to come and see you rather than just go to Amazon and it's like, oh, I'm gonna go pick up some wild yam cream and just solve all my problems. Like you might feel a little better, but there might be a bigger picture that we want to look at.
If you want to learn more about bioidentical hormones and other therapies, click the video to the right. I'm Dr. Jake, and I'll see you there.